Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mark Berry. I'm the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Plattsburgh Airbase Redevelopment Corporation. And on behalf of all of us at PARC, we want to welcome each and every one of you here this evening. I would make the observation that either you don't mind the cold weather or you have absolutely no interest in the NCAA finals, or a great deal of interest in PARC, so thank you very much for attending. We appreciate it. We're going to keep this very, very informal tonight. This is one more in a series of public forums organized by PARC for the primary purpose of making sure that you folks are well informed about what has happened, what is happening, and what will be happening out at the former Plattsburgh Air Force Base. And tonight we've got a number of things in store for you. First of all, I'd like to give you a bit of a progress report on our tenants out there at the base. Later on, our new Vice President, well, he's relatively new. He's been there 2 months, which at PARC is like 7 years. And Dan Winnicke is going to talk about some massive renovations and new construction projects that we will have occurring out there. We're going to get in a quick commercial from Robert Albert about our air show. And in between all those times and afterwards, we will respond as much as we can and as often as we can to any of the questions that you may have. I would be remiss, however, if I allowed this thing to go forward without introducing one of our best friends in Washington from the Office of Economic Administration, and making one of his many courtesy visits is Bryant Monroe. Now, where did Brian go to? He's hiding? Can you wave your hand, Brian, back there? Give that guy a hand, because he's one of our best friends in Washington. Yeah. If you have any stereotypical images of what a Washington bureaucrat either looks like or acts like, don't go see Brian, because he doesn't fit that image. He's been very helpful. And Brian, I thank you publicly for all of your help. He didn't bring any money this trip, though, so that's about all we're going to say about him. So, I've got some help. Michael's going to help me with some of these overheads up here tonight. I thought it would be helpful because, you know, you read the newspaper, you watch the TV. A lot of times what you see when you see PARC is politics. Maybe you see controversy, confrontation, so on and so forth. And I think sometimes the image is created that that's all that's happening out there. And we understand, of course, at PARC, we are living in a fishbowl. We have a lot of elected officials and taxpayers looking over our shoulder. Sometimes it's frustrating, sometimes it's very welcome, but most of the time it's just simply accepted. And it's always amazed me, and I give all of the credit to the PARC staff, that they can continue to do their job day in and day out. And when you get to the end of the year, as we are here almost at the end of the first quarter, I get the opportunity to brag about the results of the PARC staff's work. And that's a little bit about what you're going to see here as we go through this. Now, this isn't an eye test for those of you in the back. I'm sorry if those numbers are a bit small. But I wanted to talk to you about some of our tenants. These happen to be the aviation tenants that we have out at the base, beginning with the Turner Precision, a precision machine shop company. Inter-American is the name of the company that just flew in that large 747 from that well-known and popular airline called Air Dabia. It's a Gambian airline, and actually they told us the other day they may be bringing in a second plane pretty soon, and they're doing maintenance checks and minor repair work on that plane. Wood Group was one of our first tenants. They started out testing jet engines, and we just signed a brand new lease with them. My PR man's going to get mad at me because I'm doing this ahead of time. And they're going to be expanding. Our projections call for them to grow by at least another 70, 75 people, and they're going to be fixing those engines now. Excalibur Labs runs our precision measurement electronics laboratory. That's a very important aviation prospect because these are the fellows who calibrate the calibrators, and they are a very badly needed service in any location where you want to do aircraft maintenance and repair work. And they're here, and you may be hearing some more good news from them in the next couple of months. And Wood Group Aero also has some part storage activity out there, and of course the jet engine activity. And I want to call your attention to the numbers on the right, because they show some creation of jobs, particularly over the years, starting in 1995. I've been teased a little bit about my sign out front at PARC because it talks about how 360 jobs have been created. So I wanted to give you folks some of the breakdown of the numbers. We're very strict about what goes on our little job tote board that says PARC means business. The jobs have to be either in place, that is, they're real physical people out at the base, or they have to be in writing. Okay? And the jobs you see here, where it says actual 1998, those are jobs in place, and the jobs projected for the end of 1998 are in writing, and so also would be most but not all of the jobs projected for 1999. So these are just the aviation prospects. So 37 people actually working out there right now in the aviation field, and 88 total projected by the end of the year. And you'll see as we go through these how that number builds. By the way, those tenants occupying a little over 118,000 square feet of space out there at the former base. Mike? We also have a number of industrial tenants out there. Not surprisingly, many of them in mass transit, others in various fields. And that's blurry to me, Michael. I don't know how it is for you, but starting with a company who does seat manufacturing called AMI. We just announced them not too long ago. SMC Corporation, they make pneumatic door mechanisms for many of the rail cars, transit vehicles. Abmas is a company based in Canada that manufactures grinding wheels and abrasive surfaces for industrial uses. Just recently, we announced that Westinghouse Air Brake Company was coming out of the base, leasing 32,000 feet. They backed off a little bit, but they're still projecting quite a few jobs. They're going to be doing air conditioning systems, and we're in the process of renovating their building. And we haven't formally announced this yet, but you know, everybody knows about it. We all talk about it as if it's a done deal. It is. We've signed the lease. Bombardier will be constructing a $4.5 million test track out at the base. And they'll also be doing some sub-assembly work in about 30,000 square feet of space out at the base supply building. Hydrofab is another company that gets involved in hydraulic valves, and they're all signed, sealed, and delivered. And of course, the folks at TransEd leasing another 26,500 feet. Here again, if you look to the right, if you go out there right now, you will find 57 people working out there with these 5 or 6 companies, and by the end of the year you're going to see some dramatic growth with TransEd gearing up, with Bombardier going full speed, Westinghouse Air Brake growing to close to 150 people, and you're going to see that figure climb very, very dramatically this year, and a lot more activity out at the base. These 5 or 6 tenants leasing almost 154,000 square feet out at the former Air Force Base. Besides our aviation and industrial tenants, we have what we call other tenants, and I never want to neglect them because these aren't the glamorous tenants, the kinds of tenants that for which the governor might come out and cut a ribbon, but they're very, very important to the community and especially to our effort to attract more business and industry to the area. We don't do doctors anymore, but Dr. DeGiordi's still out there. He was a lease that was done before I arrived, and the military retirees are still given some quarters out there, as are the RSVP. But these are some important tenants for us coming up. For example, Clinton Community College has their technical and computer training center right there in the building where PARC is located. That's important because when a company comes in town and they want some specialized training, we're able to bring them to an on-site location already established by the college where they can get that kind of training. The child care center, you wouldn't think, well, that's no big deal, Mark, but let me tell you, when you're talking to these company executives, they're very, very worried that they're going to be unable to recruit their workers. As many of you know, it's getting tougher and tougher to recruit workers out there, so we're able to tell them that we have on-site daycare, professionally provided daycare at very reasonable prices, and this makes it easier to convince them that when they go to hire, they're not going to have a difficult time getting mom or dad over there because of child care concerns. We have Builtwell, which does picking and packing. It's a packaging operation. It's a service that many companies require. We have it on site at the base, and they employ, it varies, but usually around 30 people. For those of you interested in golf, we're still running the golf course out there through Dave Vivian. Down beneath, I'm skipping some here now, RPAC is doing a little bit of warehousing in there, and well, I skipped them around here. I got the child care center at the bottom and the counseling place at the top. But all of these folks kind of round out the presence that we have at the former Air Force Base. They're leasing almost 98,000 square feet. And interestingly enough, right now they represent about 73 people out there working in these different organizations. And we see some growth, just a very little bit, up to about 75 by the end of the year. So I want to emphasize what you're looking at here is actual employment out at the base right now and in that end of 98 column, projected for 98, where we believe we're going to be at the end of this year, and we believe it based on what we have in writing. Many of our leases have a clause in them that says the company will make a best effort to create this many jobs, and we monitor them very carefully. Later on this year, probably in the summer, we're going to put out our second annual economic impact analysis statement, and you're going to be able to see the dollar value of the payroll, the purchasing that they do, the rents that they pay, so on and so forth. And there's a summary of the aviation, industrial, and other tenants. Actual jobs out there, 167. Projected by December 98, 387. If you go by our little tote board, I think it still says 360. We haven't updated it recently. And we're projecting some fairly dramatic growth based on the prospects that we're working with and the tenants that we've signed and their growth plans, not all of which we can announce at this time of our area, or I mean of our work. And just to put that in perspective, we've got a long way to go, but on the bottom you might see this, some of you, the civilian employment at the Airbase in June of '94, which would be 15 months before the flag went down. They were hardly closing down at the time. The civilian employment was approximately 750 people. So by the end of this year, we hope to have more than half of that accomplished, restored with some very nice jobs, I might add. A lot of these transit jobs and definitely the jet engine repair jobs paying very, very handsome wages. We've got over half of them restored, and we think we'll be out there no later than the year 2000. Some of us are optimistic we could hit that target in 1999. So again, some significant progress done by the park staff, and we know that you don't always get to see and hear about this when you're reading the papers and watching TV, but it's really happening. This is just a chart showing the square footage leased, and it's a very graphic presentation of how economic development works. You get up to a certain plateau, and then it's like you make no progress for months at a time, and all of a sudden you jump up the next step, then you flatten out again, then you jump up the next step. We're starting to see some nice growth here. The good news is we're out, the end of this thing ends by the end of 1998, and we're up around 400,000 feet. The bad news is we've probably got about 1.6 million to go. That's a big place out there. But that 400,000 square feet represents more square footage than has been leased in Clinton County in the last couple of years. So it's a tremendous amount of space that's leased, much of it going off at very, very good rates. Our lease revenue is climbing from an annualized rate when I got there in June of '96, July 1st of '96, at about 110,000 a year. We'll be 10 times that much in rent revenue by the end of this year, a little over $1 million annualized rent revenue. So it's starting to accumulate. There are the job numbers again, and be careful because at the end it's projected out to 2000, and again right now at the where we sit right now, about 167, on our way to more than twice that by the end of 1998. I thought it might be interesting for you also, and I've got him doing a very simple job tonight, but don't underestimate him. Michael Sherman is our Director of Marketing. He works with Karen Gosnell in marketing, and that's probably the one department that I bug the most because I'd love to do marketing, and it's my expertise also. And they have done just a yeoman's job in marketing the Air Force Base both last year and this year. And we don't have any big secrets. We do it the old-fashioned way. We send to a CEO 2 or 3 or 4, even 5 letters. By the time he or she gets the 5th letter, Michael's on the phone calling them. They know why he's calling them, and he asks to go and see them. He asks them to come see us, and that's how we do it. We do a lot of direct mail marketing. Last year alone, 3 separate mailings, all of them 3-parters, to more than 1,350 companies, many of them in Canada where we seem to do our best. This year, more mailings planned, some of them already underway in areas like aviation, transit, certainly aviation maintenance, repair, and overhaul. You see a couple of 5-part mailers there, another 1,600 companies going to be contacted personally by the PARC marketing team. Go ahead, Mike. And in addition to direct mail, if you're out peddling real estate like we do, we go to trade shows. And you have to be careful with trade shows because they can charge you a lot of money to set up your little booth and shake a few hands. You have to pick the right ones. And I've learned over the 18 or so years that I've been in business which shows are better than others. Still learning a lot about aviation shows. I thought you might like to see the schedule for this year. Mike and Karen spend a lot of time on the road. I get to go with them on some of the bigger shows. This is what our schedule for shows looks like this year. You can see the number of exhibitors at these shows, and we've estimated in many cases based on last year's shows the number of attendants. Trade shows can be an inexpensive way to literally contact hundreds of companies. And when we go to a show, we don't just sit behind a booth and wait for somebody to stop in. Very often you'll see Mike and Karen going booth to booth, because many times your fellow exhibitor is a potential tenant. And so they work both the booths and the number of attendees, and we picked up a lot of prospects as a result of going to trade shows. I don't get to go to the one in Las Vegas, though. I think Michael's claimed that one for himself. So go ahead, Mike. And not surprisingly, our database where we keep all of our prospects, these are people whom we have talked to personally or who have contacted us, anything that suggests there's the real possibility. Now, they're not about ready to sign a lease. Some of these folks could be 2 years away, some could be 6 months away, but we keep track of them very carefully. Every single one of them gets a piece of mail from PARC every 6 weeks. That's how you keep a prospect hot. That's how you keep them warm. And you can see some growth here. Back when we got there in June of '96, we had about 40 of them in the database. Now we have 10 times that many, over 400 of them, and that's going to continue to grow. And in our business, like in a lot of things in life, we play what's called the law of large numbers. The law of large numbers says if you do anything 10 times, you will succeed at least once. So we send out 100 letters, we're probably going to get 10 appointments. If we get 10 appointments, we're probably going to get one seriously interested person. And the idea is to get as many of those as you can, and that's why that database is very important. And that single blue line is a marvelous tribute to Mike and Karen and everybody at PARC who works in the marketing. And I'll tell you, there's another key fellow here. If I get him to raise hands. Bill Malott here? Where's Bill? Bill's our Director of Tenant Services. There he is, right there. And Bill's the one that has in his head, I think, where every piece of machinery, equipment, bed, furniture, computer, and chair is on the base. If the base is ever sold, he goes with it. He knows where it all is. And with Michael bringing him in and Bill handles the tours, they get a bird's eye view of what we have available. And very often, they simply ask for something, and Bill's the one that can come up with it. I'm convinced that anything you need, we have out there. And Bill's very critical. Now, let me tell you that, oh no, Mike, you can hold that for now. I'm going to ask Dan to come up here. Sorry, Mike. There is an economic impact, of course, derived from companies coming in and putting people to work. There's the payroll, which presumably the local person spends primarily in the area. The company purchases things. They pay their rent to PARC, which is money that's circulated in the local economy, and that's all part of their economic impact. But there's something that we have a tendency to forget when we're looking at PARC's operations, and that is what PARC is bringing to the table. And I'm not talking about our payroll. Okay, what I'm talking about is federal money and state money that we have gotten our sticky little hands on and are spending in the area on renovations and construction. I'm one of the luckiest guys in the world because this past year, very late in the year, we started them, I think, the last day of the year. We picked up one of the best CEOs in the North Country. He came out of the plastics industry, and the first thing I was able to do was talk him into handling our special projects. And he's working with our Director of Special Projects, Eric Day, and you're going to see from Dan Winnicky, our Vice President at PARC, just a massive renovation and construction effort, and I'm going to let him talk about that, and I think you'll be very, very impressed because that's all money going into the local economy. Dan?
I don't know, just a couple of weeks on the job here, and he's got me standing up here talking about $13 million in revenues. It could be scary. First of all, just to let you know what our special projects group is all about, we're the people that, after the marketing people go out and bring tenants in, and they select a building on the premises, we try to tie it all together. Eric Day, our staff engineer, Bill Malott, Tenant Services, and Art Graves and his whole Building and Grounds department. We look at the building, we work with the Air Force. We do the asbestos abatement, all the environmental cleanup that needs to be done to the building. Mark's group, the marketing group, solicits petitions for a lease from the Air Force. Then we go out and we start the demolition and the cleanup, okay? We empty the buildings. We go to the cities and the towns and the municipalities now, and we get the proper zoning permits and planning boards involved. We construct the buildings to the needs of the tenants. So a lot of the buildings that we're doing are custom fit to our tenants' usages. What I've done tonight is I've put a list together of some of the projects that we're working on. Mike? Whoops, wrong one, Mike.
We'll let you show it later, Mike.
Michael must be anxious to show that slide. Okay. If we look at this, at the list here of the projects that our special projects group is working on, the first one that we have up there is the rail link, okay? This is a task that's being done both by the PARC organization as well as Bombardier and CP Rail. What we're going to do is we're going to connect a test track and rail link from the back of Bombardier, which will cross over the highway, run down through PARC, down to the Bluff Point Yard, the CP Rail, okay, and back so that Bombardier can test their rail cars. This is a $1.9 million project, okay? What we're doing, at the same time, we will hire a small rail, short rail operator, okay? We will service the tenants on the other side of the highway, the plastics companies with their freight coming in, as well as service the tenants who will be located in our park buildings. The next building is building number 2622. This is a 100,000 square foot building. It's currently rented out. The building is split by Vapor, which is the Westinghouse air conditioning and door people, and Bombardier for their electrical assemblies will take the other half of the building. Building 2363 is 30,000 square feet. It's AMI, and they are a seat assembly plant. The Wood Group, the jet engine people, have 2774. We haven't had to put very much money into that. The numbers that you see on the investments are the total investments for the projects. Those investments are also by PARC, and some of the monies are coming from the tenants, as well as 4 or 5 different funding and grant agencies that our accounting department ranges for. On the bottom you see new construction. We have a section of land that's 4.94 acres. We're putting up a 50,000 square foot building on that property. It will be able to be subdivided into 2 25,000 square foot leasable buildings. The building, as per our meeting this morning, will be situated on the lot so that if we have a tenant who is interested in a 100,000 square foot building, we will be able to put another 50,000 square foot building on the back side of it, make it all one building, or have 2 separate buildings. And that kind of came up last week. We had a tenant come in who's looking to relocate a plastics company from Georgia, and he may be interested in 100,000+ square feet. So before we broke ground and situated the building on the lot, we're planning for the future, so it gives us the most flexibility. Mike, the next one? Oh, okay. The 2815 is Trans Ed. I'm sure you've all read and heard enough about Trans Ed the last couple of weeks in the paper. They were there today selecting some office furniture. Everything is go-ahead. They've employed 6 management people from the area that'll start work on Monday the 16th. Their training programs will start. When the managers are trained, then they will start to employ the assembly people, and they also will come from our immediate area. The next building is our main hangar, okay? This building is 166,000 square feet. If you happen to have an opportunity to go down Nevada Avenue at this time, you'll see a big tail piece sticking out the rear end of that building. That's a 747 that landed a couple weeks ago. We're in the process of hopefully bringing up a a tailpiece section that'll enclose the tailpiece, so that whole airplane will be inside for work in the immediate future. We're talking about $5 million, okay? We're going to invest that in 2 phases, okay? We're going to do $2.5 million this year and $2.5 million next year. Hopefully, during that time, Inter-America will take off, or we will attract other companies that will use the aviation site. Because, you know, in our master plan, our goal is industrial and aviation usage. One of the big things that we're going to do with this hangar is, you know, we're going to create infrared heating, okay, elements from the floor and down, so you radiate heat, so we eliminate the use of our central heating plant and the gas and the oil that we were using in the past, and that's a major cost, and new doors to that building. Building 2815, I'm sorry, the next one is nose dock number 2. Mark, he's looking at me kind of funny because we have that one up there. Excuse me. We're in the process of helping a company fill out some permits and getting them all registered in the state to do work, and hopefully in the near future they're going to start painting small craft airplane there. And that should be coming on board relatively quickly. We're not at liberty to discuss the name of the company just yet, but things are moving pretty rapidly. Building 2796 is Hydrofab. This is a building that was in pretty good shape. We really didn't have to invest too much there. We got the tenant in, and they're up and running. Nose dock number 7. This is an old nose dock that when we finish our rail link, we'll pass right by it. And we're negotiating and it looks like it's by next winter, it should pretty much come to fruition. We will be storing some bulk salt and some other things in that building, bulk things off the rail car. The next group, we refer to them as incubator buildings. We have 5 of them currently, okay? We're going to invest about $200,000 in these buildings. And the reason we're going to do that is when tenants come on, they like to see a building and what it looks like. So we've taken these 5 buildings. They all range from 5,000 square feet to 13,000 square feet. What we're going to do is we're building a central cookie cutter that will work in any of the buildings. Currently, we've taken 2 of the buildings and we've hollowed them out. We've gotten environmentally cleaned them up. We've run the electrical to the outside of the building, and they are shells. As a tenant comes in, as Mike shows the buildings, we can take them in and we can create floor plans for them, create the office space they need, add the bathrooms, and renovate the buildings as we go. We hope to bring 2 of these buildings on board in April, 2 in May, and the last one hopefully by September.
Buildings just opened this afternoon. Were you there? No. No, okay. I don't know if the DOT project mandated a prevailing wage rate clause or not. When it's state funds, we are dictated to by the state, okay? Well, we're not state funds, we're federal funds. That's right.
Are you paying these buildings
Air Force was very
So
nice.
you mean my mom lived in your neighborhood when she was a kid, Mr. Rogers?
That's right,
Well,
Jacob.
I didn't say we finished the job, all I said was we're started on it.
Wow, that must have been a long time
You know,
ago.
and you're right to do that, but I'm going to tell you something about a
Oh,
company
no.
that came to
I have
Rouse's
a
Point.
family who wants
And when
me
they
back
came, this
home.
was many, many years
When
ago,
do you have
they
to
started
go?
out with 4 employees, and they
After
were
I
paying
visit
them 50
Artemis.
cents an hour. Obviously, this was 2 years ago. And
What's the
everybody
point
kind
of
of
having Mr. Rogers
snickered
stay at your house?
because this little Canadian company showed up,
Don't tell
and they
anyone.
were working on a little
Because
hole in
we
the
don't
wall
want everyone
office.
coming over here,
But they
banging
grew,
on the door,
and they grew
and
some
asking
more,
for lots
and
of
they grew some more.
autographs.
Yes, sir, back here.
And this pertains, I guess, to along the same lines. If PARC gets its authority status, you will be authorized to issue industrial bonds.
That's correct.
What are the current limitations and plans for any such issuance, and who is the ultimate obligator on those things?
Industrial revenue bonds are a financial tool used to, frankly, to affect generally a tax-exempt status for the project. It's misunderstood by a lot of people, including me when I first started doing those over a dozen years ago, that somehow there is either a federal, state, or even a local obligation or obligatory, is what you said. The way a revenue bond works is that the Industrial Development Agency, or in this case PARC, would issue this bond, this piece of paper. And it's issued for a particular project, XYZ company coming in and putting up $1 million building. Somebody has to buy the bond. Traditionally, it's a bank. The bank buys this bond, but they don't buy it based on what PARC's creditworthiness is. PARC has nothing to do with it. They buy it based on the creditworthiness and the financial viability of the project, of the occupant, which is the company. And what happens is the money passes from the bank through the IDA to the project occupant. And the project occupant is obligated to pay the bond back. The money passes from him to the IDA and then on to the bank. It's done through a series of leases and legal agreements. And the only real purpose of PARC, or the IDA, is to hold technical title to the project. They hold technical title to the land and the buildings. They lease it all back to the project occupant, the company, and that occupant has all the normal controls that you would if you actually own the land. Why do they? And what we've agreed to, and what the municipalities have agreed to, is PARC will adopt the same uniform tax abatement code that the county IDA has, and it can only be modified if the taxing jurisdictions want it to be modified. So our authority completely empowers the taxing jurisdiction, the school, the town, the city, or the county, to give as much or as little a tax break as they want. And I want to emphasize that in instance of industrial revenue bonds, the only one that's caught holding the bag if the project fails is the buyer of the bond, which is the bank. And believe me, they don't buy those bonds unless they know the project occupant can pay them off. Long-winded answer, but that's how bonds work. A little bit complicated. Other questions or comments? As long as there's no tomatoes. We'll go back to you. Go ahead.
At the end of this year, when the federal government is going to take the base. Am I right or wrong?
The record of decision clearly states that we have until the end of the year to achieve authority status, or they will exercise their rights to sell the base either by negotiated sale or public auction. That's what the record of decision says.
Mr. Manhattan also said that he would vote against this.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear all of you.
Mr. Silvers from Manhattan said that he would vote against this, okay? If it came to his vote and his legislation was simple, that he would shoot it down. Now, what happens to all these tenants if the base gets shot and they say there's no more in New York State? You are not the sole authority to...
I'm not aware that Mr. Silver has already publicly expressed his opinion on this.
Factual, he stated this.
Yeah, well, if he already stated that, we've got a long battle ahead of us. But let me try to answer the other part of your question. If the authority legislation fails, okay, if it is not passed in the New York State Legislature, despite the fact that the town, the county, and the city have agreed on this, then we will not be able to comply with the deadline. And at this point, we are in uncharted territory. Most bases have never been given a deadline, but Plattsburgh is that far behind the curveball. So now the question is, will they extend the deadline? Will they proceed immediately and turn the thing over to the General Services Administration, and then we have the mother of all auctions? Or will something else happen? And I don't honestly know. Our goal here is to achieve authority status in the way, shape, manner, and form that the town, the city, and the county have asked us to do it, and we're going to stay on track as long as we can with that.
Why is the committee, your committee's way behind and you're receiving the curveball?
Why are we behind?
Why shouldn't your homework been done now with the city, the counties, and yourself?
I can only, my friend, I can only speak for the 22 and a half months that I've been there. I've been pedaling as fast as I can.
This is not direct.
Yeah. No, I know. I think there are good reasons and bad that we got off to a slow start. Let me tell you, when a community loses an Air Force base, it ain't no picnic. I mean, it's hard to get everybody working together. But as I go around the country and talk to some of these other bases, I think we've climbed the ladder pretty quick. My aviation consultant sent me a chart the other day that says that we are in the top half of bases that closed the same time we did in terms of jobs created and investments generated. And I would also point out that there were only a handful of communities that were stripped and picked as clean as Plattsburgh was. You know, you go to like a lot of these other bases, they were left with the Defense Financial Accounting System office. They have an Air National Guard or an Army Guard unit. They have a laboratory like Griffiths does in Rome. They were left a federal presence. Plattsburgh's federal presence left it. We were left with absolutely nothing at all. So every job that we've created has had to be a new job with no help plowing the runway and those sorts of things. We still get from John and his friends a lot of money to help us out, but that too will run out, and so the struggle continues. Other questions or comments? Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to switch gears on you. You talked a lot about the industrial jobs and aviation, and I know that's your primary focus right now, but what about the other jobs that you're talking about trying to bring to the base? Is anybody working on those at all, the cultural and recreational opportunities, technological and service jobs? What's being done in those areas?
Our mission, of course, focuses on increasing the economic opportunities, but we also mention in our mission statement some of the social, recreational, and other opportunities that can be increased. And we want to do all of it, of course, in a financially and environmentally sound manner. It's interesting that you bring that up because although our first two goals is in industrial use and aviation use, we have another goal that is all of the other uses. And it represents our efforts to try to make some use of the historical assets. It represents our effort to try to utilize in the best way possible all of the recreational assets out there, to do what we can to further the social and the cultural objectives of any intelligent community that wants to grow. But I'm going to be honest with you and tell you that many times they do get short shrift because we focus so heavily on the aviation jobs and the industrial jobs. So if you scan those other uses, you find out that in terms of recreation, releasing out all the ball fields and trying to make use of those facilities, and we got an air show coming up. If you look at the historical assets, we're trying to protect them. But other than the Randy Beach's Antique Car Show and the Historical Society, we're not doing an awful lot in historical. Our report card doesn't look so well in those other uses. I think it'll come with time as we accomplish the bigger goals. We're not ignoring it, but it doesn't get the same priority. Yes, sir.
You're in agreements to give the city those 4 parcels of land?
What we have agreed, and Shirley and Dan and whoever else from the city, and correct me when I make a mistake here, what we have agreed to give the city is the lakefront property. We're still trying to figure out exactly where that boundary is going to be. We've agreed to give them approximately 180 units of the renovated housing. And we're prepared to execute a separate legally binding agreement right now as PARC currently stands. And I believe we've also reached agreement on putting some language in the law that creates the authority that says that the minute the authority is conceived or born, that we will execute an agreement of sale with the city for the transfer of the lakefront and the housing. Those are the two elements that we've agreed to so far.
It'll be a sale or a lease?
Well, the intent is to transfer it immediately. If it's a sale, it'll be a sale for $1. I mean, there's not any big money involved here. I believe, based on what I've seen, that it doesn't have to be a lease because those are fairly clean environmental sites. But I will tell you that in some instances, when we go to sell things, maybe not what the city wants, we're not going to be able to sell it because the Air Force will not have given it to us. There are spots of the base that are still environmentally, they're not dirty, but they require monitoring. And those parcels, they will simply lease to us for maybe 99 years. So anybody else wants them will have to lease them from us for 99 years. But I think the city parcels, that's not a problem. So they'll be transferred. Now, if they want to give us more than $1, we'll take it. So.
What about the town? What's the town get out of it?
So far, the town's been very nice. They haven't asked me for anything. But give them a few days. They'll come up with some. I think they've been eyeing the golf course.
They're smart.
So, yeah, they may be smart. That's right. Oh, Rebel's here. Sorry, Rebel. I didn't see you.
Money to keep that up. Anybody that takes those housing, the government couldn't even keep them up. Whoever takes them over is going to have a real bad time of it.
I understand. Other questions or comments? Way in the back.
What are you going to do with the gyms on the base?
Oh, that's another good question. We actually have 2 gymnasiums. We have one in the new base right next to a great big pool, and then we have one in the old base. And I'm going to pick on John Haru a little bit, my site manager, because the Air Force, for reasons which I suppose make some sense, they don't want us to get in the business of leasing these buildings up for a week or 2 weeks. And yet, that's the kind of demand that we have. We have a lot of groups, intramural clubs, pick-me-up indoor soccer clubs, some of the schools, for example, and no one entity has the financial ability to lease the gym or the gym and the pool from us for even a single year. And yet, the minute we take over a building, the Air Force likes to see us take it for a whole year, and they also want us to pay the bills. Our heating bill in all these buildings right now is adjusted at $1 per foot per year. So you take the gym and the pool, what's the square footage on that, Bill, quickly?
The gym and the pool is 30,000.
About 30,000 feet. So it's a $30,000 heat bill. And we haven't even touched sewer, water, and electric. And we haven't even talked rent yet. So Seton Catholic comes to me and says, geez, we'd like to have that gym for all of our area Catholic schools. And I tell them $30,000 just for the heat, and they run in the other direction. And I don't blame them. Oh, and we also have insurance you got to worry about too, and that's not cheap. So we're between a rock and a hard place. We have the Air Force on the one side saying, if you want it, take it for a whole year, and we're not going to pay any of the bills. And then I got tenants who say, I'll take it for a couple of days, and I don't have any money. And so we're going to have to wait until we got enough people lined up that'll take on the gym for a whole year, or, that I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon, or we're going to have to wait until we become an authority, we take title to the gym, and then we'll do what we want to do right now, which is to come up with a daily rate and say, okay, the daily rate is this, and whether you're Seton Catholic or Plattsburgh High School, you can pay it, you're in. And for those kinds of facilities, we're not going to be looking to make a fortune off of them. We'd just be happy to pay our bills. So that's where we sit now. That's where we want to be. Tough nut to crack and a great question. I'm glad you asked it. What else can I tell you? Other questions? Ideas?
Mark, has the pool at that new base gym been destroyed by lack of use?
No, the pool continues to be filled with water. It's maintained complements of the Air Force. They even treated it not too long ago. And by the way, I tell you the reason they keep the water in it, because I'm told because of the high water table, if they took the water out, the whole thing would collapse. Is that fairly correct? Something like that. So yeah, the water's still in it, and I wouldn't go diving in there right now. You'd probably find something worse than zebra mussels in it, but it could be made ready fairly quickly. Fairly quickly, yeah. So, what else can I tell you? Other questions? That's a quiet bunch. You know, I recognize a lot of these faces from previous forums, and many of you, although you may not agree with everything that PARC does, we're certainly agreed that what happens out at the former airbase is a priority. I want to compliment you on your interest in what we're doing. I want to encourage you to keep our feet to the fire. If you have some questions or concerns, we don't necessarily enjoy criticism, but we know that we need it. Keep on coming at us, and say a prayer for us, because we got some tough battles ahead in Albany for that authority legislation. Oh, one question over here. Go ahead.
Yes, Mark. Most of the emphasis has been on the new base and the aviation end of it. The old base, the housing, Colonel's Row, assuming the authority goes in next year, like we all hope, what do you foresee as the outcome of that? Is anybody going to maintain the buildings at all, cut the grass, or exactly what?
Still waiting for Clyde to come and bail me out and take the whole thing, but he hasn't done it yet.
In reality, I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think he can afford it.
Yeah, as it stands right now, the old base would be turned over to the authority also. We have no immediate plans. We recognize that some of the Colonel's Row can be used for executive and management housing if the board and the real estate market permits. The Oval, of course, is a center for recreation. There have been thousands and thousands of kids and parents out there in the last couple of summer seasons, playing out there. I think it's going to become more and more of a community center. If the city gets to the point where they can get that rec trail set up, I think you'll see more activity out there, but no immediate plans for the Oval itself. I will say, and this has received some publicity, that we are very close to finalizing the deal with a developer out of Watertown, Mark Purcell and Don Exford, in setting up a senior citizens complex out by the Nevada Oval area. They're contemplating a congregate living unit, which is a single large building with about 40 to 45 units within it, and then surrounding it another, I believe, 30 to 40 units, independent living units. We have a lot of hurdles to cross in that project, or to overcome, but if that goes forward, I think you're going to see that expand rapidly, and Mr. Purcell and Exford have also indicated an interest in a second phase, which would be designed and catered toward military retirees. So I think you're going to see the development on the old base be rather slow. You're going to see some activity out there in Nevada Oval first, a lot of soccer playing and baseball playing, a couple of people filling up pieces of the Colonel's Row, and then a long wait until you see a heck of a lot more. That's what I think is going to happen. Gee, I was going to say goodbye. Okay, go ahead.
No, that's when I read in the paper, because they said financially secure senior citizen housing.
Right.
When they said financially secure, to me it was more or less, it's still for people that got money. And up here in the North Country, there's nobody that's got money, even with this air show. It's easy for $10, but the problem is that $10, you gotta find it. You gotta find $10 to come to your air show. Without a job.
I heard Shirley O'Connell's got a few bucks, but now, let me tell you something. What Don Exford and Mark Purcell found, they've got one of these projects for what they refer to as financially secure seniors. By the way, you know what they mean by that? I asked about this. They mean people like my mom and dad, who happen to both be retired government workers. They paid off the house in Champlain, New York, and because they got sick of worrying about the house, when they went to Florida for 4 months, they finally said, to heck with it, sold it, took their money, and moved, and by the way, my dad's boat, which I used to fish on, and moved to Sebring, Florida, and now they're living there forever. And that's what they mean by financially secure senior citizens. They did a project like this that they want to do here. They did it in, what's the name of that place? Lowellville, New York. Have you ever been to Lowellville, New York? I mean, it's a great place, but you know, if you blink, you'll miss it. They filled up the units before it was even finished. They did a survey here, and they came up with 4 times the demand that they discovered in Lowellville. The average age of the occupant in Lowellville is 81 years old. Okay? Their average customer has $100,000 in equity. That just means they paid off their house, that's all. All right? But they have a steady retirement income, too. And in here, we've got retired correction officers, retired teachers, retired college professors, retired nurses, retired professional people, and we keep losing them. They get to retirement age, they run down to Florida for a month, then it's 2 months, then it's 3 months, and they're always down there in Florida wondering if the furnace kicked on, if the paper boy has 28 papers stacked up into the box, and every burglar in town is having a good time. And they finally give up. And they said, heck, we'll just sell the place and move to Florida. And we lose 2 great people who can contribute to the community, 2 incomes, retirement incomes that could be spent here. And I think this project is a way to keep our senior citizens who should be able to enjoy their golden years in what was their hometown, still go to Florida without any headaches, and help the local economy at the same time. I think it's a great project, and I think you may be underestimating the demand for those kinds of units. We're certainly getting a tremendous response from all 4 local senior citizens group. They're lined up, and those people, Exford and Purcell, they can't stop the phone from ringing. Let me go over here.
So what are you going to do when these people go to Florida? Are you going to maybe renovate the houses to other people?
No, actually, what these folks are planning is a brand-new series of units. They're going to construct new buildings. And what they do is they buy into these apartments, or they buy into a unit, and everything's taken care of for them. So they can literally go live in Florida for 3 years, and they don't have to worry about their housing unit. There's somebody there that does all the maintenance. They get 2 bills every month. One's the rent, one's the phone bill. It's a worry-free, hassle-free environment. And when the daddy dies and she wants to come back to the North Country, there's somebody to check on her. And if she gets a little bit too frail, she can move into the big building. And there's simple medical care there. And she can share meals with somebody. And if she doesn't come out by 9 o'clock, somebody knocks on the door and says, Mrs. Berry, are you okay? That's what these units allow them to do, to go back and forth to Florida, to go back and forth to their families and not worry about their home. And so nothing happens, it's their place, and they'll keep going back to that place. This is brand new construction, what we're talking about. And by the way, when they put them up, they'll take down some of that crappy stuff that's already there, which is really neat. With the asbestos. Dan?
Let me just blab one more time. It's not that dire on the old base either, because a A few months ago, there was a meeting between Mr. Barry, myself, and Bill Berman, and Bill brought to the city council a proposal that the city has a responsibility with the old base just as well as PARC does, and that we should attempt to enter into some type of a joint marketing program to market that oval area. And that's a very important step for the city to take, and Mark had made it very clear at that time that their focus has to be aviation and industrial, and I think that soon enough you'll see the city coming forward with what we can do to assist PARC. So it's not all that bad on the old base that's going to sit there and rot. We feel it's pretty darn important to the city that this thing be somehow filled up also to enhance the trail when it goes in, enhance our lakefront property when it's transferred to us. We have to do that. So it's not that dire that, I just wanted to mention.
It has potential, and I think if the city and PARC work together on it, we can achieve more in a much quicker manner, too.
So if your local government's going to redo your house park here in Florida at the end of this year, what happens to the people that are on the base that already have the leases?
The local governments have agreed in authority. What we're waiting for is a state approval. The leases will have to be respected by the Air Force and by any future owners. Okay, those leases are going to outstrip any transfers. It's tough for me to speculate how that would happen. I would think, for example, if I were leasing an entire building in the base and I woke up one morning and discovered that the Air Force was selling off everything, PARC was disappearing as the landlord, I'd probably go to the Air Force and say, I'll buy the building I'm in. So that could happen. Those that don't want to do that or aren't in a position to do that have a lease in place. And just like if you're leasing an apartment and your landlord sells the place in the middle of your lease, the new landlord has to respect it. And you can't raise your rent or kick you out until the end of your lease.
And it also provides the state and federal government that will respect that law?
Yeah, our leases are set up so that they respect them, right.
Yes.
Yeah.
But who would provide the local services? If there's no money for the local services, how are they gonna stay there?
I'll tell you, again, it's uncharted territories. All I can guarantee you is that there'll be no guarantees. I want to thank you all very much. We appreciate your help. I hope you enjoyed yourself. Got a few questions answered. Have a safe trip home.